For those that don't know me, my name is Kyle Sigler with Western Title. I'm the statewide sales manager. We were fortunate that we were able to partner with Hiatus Homes for this call. Just for you all, just so you know, this is the class of navigating Oregon's middle housing laws and opportunities for real estate professionals. This will be a 1 hour CE credit for today. And we were lucky enough to get a CEO and founder of Hiatus Homes, Jesse Russell. And just to go over his bio, so Jesse's the founder of Hiatus Homes, located in Bend, Oregon, and it's a base company known for high quality and intelligently designed home construction. The small footprint of these homes help create urban density and provide more housing inventory during a time of our national housing shortages. He's considered a thought leader in the design and development of small spaces and communities. He's an advocate for people living in smaller, more efficient net zero homes. So I am pleased to welcome Jesse Russell here. So we'll get his presentation, and then at the end we'll do a Q&A. So if you have any questions or anything, please place them in that Q&A section down at the bottom of your screen, and I'll throw it over to Jesse.
Hey, thanks a lot, Kyle. I really appreciate you letting us do this today. It's pretty exciting. I think this stuff is really exciting. Some people may find it a little bit boring, but we're going to go over some really detailed stuff, and really happy to answer any questions because it does get a bit confusing sometimes. So thanks everybody for participating. This is way more people than I thought would show up for something like this. So cool to see there's so many people out there that are interested in what's going on. So yeah, hi everyone. I'm Jesse Russell. As he said, I'm the CEO of Hiatus Homes, and we're a development company. We're based here in Bend, Oregon, and we focus on building small, sustainable houses. This is things like cottage communities, backyard ADUs, infill housing that usually fits into the existing neighborhoods. And over the past several years, I've worked directly with these housing types and the policies that are behind them. And today's talk is all about giving you a practical guide to what's changing in Oregon housing laws and how you can take advantage of those changes. Now, so whether you're a real estate developer that's trying to help clients find land, or you're a builder that's looking to shift into smaller scale projects, or a homeowner that's wondering what's possible on your lot, these middle housing laws are really offering a lot of flexibility and just a ton of opportunity that we haven't seen for like a decade. So we'll cover what the laws allow, and I'll go over some of our past and our current projects, and I'll also walk through the most common missteps and how to avoid those, so you don't waste time and money trying to figure all this stuff out. So I grew up here in Bend. I went to the University of Oregon. I earned a degree in journalism. And then after college, I ended up in Los Angeles, and I was working as a reality TV producer of all things. And after about a decade of being down there, I was just getting really burned out, and I was just trying to figure out a way I could come back here to Bend. And while I was pitching these show concepts to a network, they had just picked up a series called Tiny House Nation, and I had never even heard of tiny houses on wheels. So I went back to my office and I looked them up, and I just immediately thought, God, this would really work in Bend because we were having such a housing shortage at that time and still have. So I sold everything. I moved back home, and I built my first tiny house in my friend Kit's backyard. That's me and Kit with our first tiny house, the Hiatus. We went on to build some mini pubs and tiny taverns. So that was the beginning of Hiatus at Home, or Hiatus Homes. Then in 2015, Bend's first cottage housing code was adopted. This allowed small homes on permanent foundations grouped together in a community. And that's when I launched Hiatus Benham, which was a 22-unit project that became the first to use that code. And this really proved that there was a demand for this kind of housing, and it delivered some really, really strong returns to the investors that were involved in that project. So after the success of that first cottage community, we just knew that there was a real demand for smaller, more efficient housing. But we also realized that there were really few developers that were actually building at this scale. So we decided to scale the model ourselves. And that's when we launched in 2020 our Hiatus Capital Fund. Now, this brought in about $8 million in equity from about 60 local investors. Most of those are local to Bend. The idea was to try to keep the development dollars and the profits circulating within our city, instead of relying on institutional capital that pulls the returns out of the state. So that fund is currently deployed across 4 development projects. They're all centered on small scale infill housing. And together they total about 130 units. And that includes about 50 cottage units. And there's attached and detached ADUs. And there's even a 59 unit micro apartment. So these projects demonstrate that you really don't need 50 acres and a big national home builder to do some meaningful development. You can work within the fabric of the existing neighborhood. You can partner with owners and build, what I think are smart, beautiful homes, that people are actually wanting to live in. So we've looked at the kinds of projects we're developing through our capital fund. But what we've learned over time is that the same principles and processes apply to all kinds of projects, not just our own. So we started getting approached by people who had land. Sometimes it was a backyard, sometimes it was multiple lots. And the people were asking, for help navigating the same questions we were trying to solve, which is, basically, what can I build here? What's the city going to allow? And of course, how much is it going to cost? So that led us to develop Hiatus at Home. And this is a structure we now use with a range of clients, whether they're building just a couple ADUs or they're trying to do like a small cottage community or even a large one. So it starts with our feasibility process where we evaluate the site, we understand the code, and then we work with the city, and then we try to build something that's viable and it's appropriate for whatever that lot was. So what we're going to show next is how that process works and how the changes in Oregon's housing laws are really making this kind of development really more accessible than it really ever has been. So before we dive into this, you have to know the definition of middle housing, which has sometimes many definitions. So middle housing really refers to multi-unit or clustered housing types that'll fit within the scale of a single family neighborhood. It offers more affordability and density without becoming like a really big, large apartment building. It includes duplexes and triplexes, fourplexes, townhomes, and cottage clusters. And these are the kind of like walkable, sort of human scale homes that really used to be common until zoning made them illegal. So what makes them middle is really in their form and kind of how they feel. They're really modest in size usually. They're often, as I said, in really walkable locations. And they're really designed to complement the existing community that's already there. So to understand what's possible today, we have to look at how Oregon's housing laws have changed. So over the past few years, there's kind of four major state bills that I'm going to cover today that have shaped and are reshaping what you can build and how land gets divided, how quickly cities have to respond to this. Oregon is actively removing barriers to middle housing. They're making it easier for homeowners, small developers, and builders to try to do this. So the key bills, HB 2001, SB 458, HB 2138, and SB 6. So what do all those numbers mean? Each one of those is trying to solve a kind of different piece of the puzzle, from zoning and land division to permitting and the timelines. So let's walk through each one, and I'll kind of show you how they work on an actual project here in a moment. So House Bill 2001, that was passed way back in 2009, and it really kicked off Oregon's middle housing reform. It ended this exclusive single family zoning in a lot of the cities. And this was, as Oregon often is, was the first law of its kind in the US. Now cities over 10,000 residents in Oregon, they have to allow for this middle housing type in single family zones. So it's about putting these existing lots that are within the city limits to a lot better use. It aligns the zoning with how people actually want to live. And then the next important bill was Senate Bill 458, which passed in 2021. This made these homes easier to finance and sell. So it allowed you to actually split the lots in a duplex, a triplex, or cottages into separate lots. And then those units could actually be sold individually without being a full subdivision. So these two bills together kind of really changed the game, and they've made middle housing legal and really buildable in dozens of cities, across Oregon. Two more bills that are coming up that are happening this summer is SB 2138, and this would extend middle housing rules to urban unincorporated areas, those are like areas that are actually inside of our urban growth boundary, but they're a little bit outside the city limits. It also clarifies that plexes, so a duplex, triplex, quadplex, can be attached or detached. In Bend, we've always been able to look at triplexes and do them as separate units. It also raises the minimum size or the maximum size of a cottage cluster home. One that's really interesting, it prevents new CC&Rs from banning any of this middle housing. So you can't say, no, I don't want an ADU in my community. So yeah, that one's really exciting. SB6, which if you've done any development, you'll really love this one. This is a shot clock bill, and it sets a 45-day deadline for the cities to approve or deny any of these middle housing permits. So both of these bills are in final review in the 2025 legislation session. And if they pass, they'll take effect right away because they have an emergency clause in them. And most people will start seeing the benefits when it comes to actually like building homes later this year or in early 2026, kind of depending on how quickly each of the cities implements them. So we've covered what the laws are and what they're meant to achieve. But the next question is, how do these policies actually translate into buildable projects? Well, at Hiatus, we've been designing and constructing these smaller homes and cottage communities, long before the zoning was allowed statewide. And we've learned how to use these new rules in smart ways, to fit more houses on the lot, to make them easier to sell, and to speed up the city approval process. So the next few slides, I'm going to walk you through specific projects where we use these tools. We'll show how we evaluate the land, how we navigate the code, and develop projects that will really work in the real world. The goal is to give you a really good picture of what's possible and how you or your clients might choose a similar path. So this is a really interesting one. This project, we looked at a property with an existing home that was already on it, and the goal was to add this second unit, but we really had kind of two paths that our client wanted to take. So we went down both of those paths to get cost. So option one was just to add an ADU. And so under Oregon law, ADUs are a lot cheaper with their SDCs or their system development charges. So in this case, you see the SDCs for the 800 square foot ADU, they're around $6,000. Option two was to treat the project as a duplex. So that existing home is the one unit, and then we're adding a new one, which is the detached second one. So that gives a little bit more flexibility. So the building could be up to 1,200 square feet, but it comes with a lot higher fees. Like when you look at these SDCs for the duplex, it totaled like $25,500. So huge difference for what's about 400 square feet. But maybe that's important to people, and so sometimes they're willing to pay that. So yeah, this decision, it really comes down to economics and financing and, what's the long-term use of that unit. But it's a great example of how like these small early decisions, like what type of unit you're going to build, it can really, really affect what your cost is going to be and what the timeline to get that done is. Oh, this is another one. Okay, so this is Hawthorne. And this is a great example of how the middle housing legislation, specifically the HB 2001, it enabled us to create more housing on like just a standard residential lot. The property originally had a single short-term rental that was to the north there. And then, we kept that existing unit, and then we added two more units, forming what is a true detached triplex, but it's all on this one lot. Now, we didn't subdivide the property. So all three of these units share one common water meter, and the infrastructure is all common. And so SB 458 wasn't used. But you could apply this now in the future if they wanted to. The homeowner could split these lots up and try to sell the units individually. Now, but there's something you really have to know about that, because if you go to do that, and we've tried to do this, if you go to subdivide under 458 with this particular one, you'd have to then go back in and install separate water meters to each of the units. And then you'd have to record easements for shared sewer driveways and pedestrian paths. So while the code does allow for future subdivision, it's not a trivial step. Like the infrastructure set up and the meters is going to cost a lot of money to do that. Yeah, so for now, it remains a single lot with 3 units. Just to give you an idea, the 2 units, the 600 square foot unit that rents for about $2,000 a month. This is right near downtown Bend, and the 800 square foot unit rents for around $2,400 a month. I think this really reflects the demand for these high quality compact homes in these walkable neighborhoods. Okay, so this is an interesting one where it is being divided. So Silver Sage, this is a really great example of a Hiatus home project. And this is one where our client is developing the site in partnership with 2 other family members. So together they're building something that creates long-term value for the family, and it contributes, the much needed housing that we need in these neighborhoods. The site's about 11,000 square feet, and it is a vacant lot. So then rather than building a single big home, they saw the opportunity to use Oregon's middle housing policies to do something that's a lot more flexible and, really gives you a lot more units. So what we decided to do is we designed a detached triplex. So these are 3 individual homes, each with its own entry and unique character. They're arranged around a shared site plan, but unlike that Hawthorne project that we were just talking about, this one is subdivided. So they're each their individual lots. And what that really means is each of them has their own utilities, and each is able to have its own ownership and its own mortgage after it's constructed. So that opens up the door to a range of options. They could keep the homes, they could rent them, they could sell one, they could sell 2 if they needed to do that down the line. And, this is exactly what SB 458 was designed to support. These small scale, it's a family driven development, and it's turning this underutilized urban land into a really livable space. This is over on Baltimore. If you're familiar with Bend, this is over by Columbia Park. This project started as like a really typical single family home on a standard RS zone lot, right around 5,500 square feet, which we have a ton of those size lots here in Bend. And the site wasn't being used to its full potential. So we're redeveloping it into 4 detached units, so a full 4-plex, using one of what I think is like our most aggressive interpretation of this middle housing code. So the owner's plan is to keep these as long-term rentals for now, but if she wants to sell the homes later, she could. So yeah, I mean, it's projects like this, it helps meet our housing needs, and it just keeps the community down there by the park not overwhelmed with huge apartments at this point. This is one of our larger developments. So this is Hiatus Perel, right back over by our original cottage development that we did. And we're kind of evaluating this in 2 different paths for delivering a small housing community: a cottage cluster development, or using the middle housing land division using that SB 458. And each of these options kind of offers different benefits and different trade-offs. So it's been a lot of trying to figure this out. The cottage cluster path, it requires shared common spaces. So you need to have walkways. There needs to be a central courtyard or some open green space. It typically includes an HOA to manage all the shared infrastructure. And it's a good option when you want a strong sense of community and lots of outdoor space. But it adds a lot of complexity in terms of the long-term kind of ownership and management of the community. So the other option we're looking at is using SB 458 and dividing these up into separate lots where each home sits on its own parcel. Now, this approach doesn't require shared common area or an HOA, and the land use review is a lot faster too. So land use application is only around 60 days versus 120 days, which is really great. To save 3 months on a project means saving a lot of money usually. So both of these options can deliver the same number of homes and maintain that kind of neighborhood feel. But the SB 458 gives us more flexibility when it comes to how we sell the homes, which is a real big advantage on a project like this. All right, so now I'd like to walk you through kind of our overall process when we're developing these projects. And this is where it kind of all starts to come together, where, the policy starts to turn into a real plan. So once we find a good piece of land, the first step is we lock it up and get a due diligence period. And that gives us some time to kind of analyze the site before we really commit financially to it. So we start with this feasibility, and really that's a framework that looks at the essentials. It's the zoning, it's utility access, it's how the site is laid out, and any of the potential constraints we have there. We ask ourselves, like, how many units can we fit on this? We usually start with the most density and work backwards. Is there fire access problems? Is the lot buildable as is, or do we need to do a lot of grading? These are all things we start to think about. And then next, we prepare a pre-application with the city. And that's where we put our ideas down on the table. We do a site map, and we share that plan with the city. We ask them all the questions that we have, and then we get this input back from the city, and that's really good. It sometimes uncovers things that are going to be really costly to the piece of land that looked like it was really developable. Oftentimes, if we're in contract, or we'll go back to that landowner, we'll show them what we've found, and try to get the land for a little bit cheaper to cover those costs that we didn't know about. So next, we move into the financial modeling, and this includes like mapping out the horizontal and the vertical costs, all of our soft costs, permits, fees, and then we think about the expected revenue, whether it's a for sale project or it's going to stay as rentals. And then we have to factor in the financing, the construction loan, any equity investors that we have, any carrying costs we have. And that usually gives us a pretty good idea before we break ground. And this is where where most projects either pencil out or they just fall apart and we move on. And it's why we take it really seriously, because with the right framework, we don't really waste a bunch of time. We try to not waste too much capital on ideas that just aren't going to work. So this is kind of some of the common things that can go wrong here. So, with the Perel project, you saw how these different development paths on the same lot, they can lead to like really different outcomes depending on the zoning and the ownership and the design choices that you make. So it's not just about what the law allows. It's really about how you apply it. And this has happened so many times where, we've had these laws passed, the city adopts them, we go to use the laws, and there's just some things that need to be tweaked about it. So yeah, and this is where a lot of people run into trouble. A common misstep is assuming that the residential zoning means that you can build what you want. But if it's RL, RS, or RM, those zones all allow different levels of density. RL being the least, you might be able to only do one house depending on what the size of the lot is. And then RM is you'll have a lot more density with that. The cities also really interpret the middle housing laws differently. Portland and Bend are all in. I mean, they're doing everything they can to try to have this kind of housing. Others like Westland, Happy Valley, pretty slow to adapt this stuff, and some just like actively resisting the change completely. So you got to know the political landscape of the city that you're buying the land in or trying to develop in. There's also infrastructure issues all the time. So you might find that your sewer line is on the wrong side of the street. The driveway is too narrow for fire access. There's just a bunch of stuff that comes up with infrastructure. So we like to do do a bit of a civil plan in that pre-app and get some information back. So yeah, even the type of project that you're pursuing, it can create confusion, as we said, with the ADUs, duplex, triplex, quadplex. Those all come with really different fees, rules, setbacks. So really getting to know what type of units that you're going to build in your project is super important. And then again, there's the financing. So the thing is these aren't really cookie cutter, deals. Most banks don't have a product for these infill projects. So you often need to layer the capital. You might need to bring in some friends and family money for the land, get the seller to carry the land, do some private lending, just to get you started in the project. So yeah, this legislation, it's created a lot more opportunity, but the process, it just isn't always really that straightforward. So, after navigating these common missteps in the small scale development firsthand, Hiatus has built a process to try to support projects that's well beyond the feasibility phase. So the next phase for us often begins with capital structuring. We're able to do that as well. Identifying financial strategies, we can do models for the project. And in some cases, we'll help raise the equity through syndication or even co-invest in projects. And once the funding is in place and the land is in contract and our designs are complete, the focus shifts to the permitting and construction administration. And that mostly consists of us coordinating with a lot of consultants, navigating the approval process through the city and other municipalities, and then managing timelines in the budget to make sure that this whole thing comes in on time and on money, as they say. I've never had one do that, but hopefully someday we will. The final phase is the marketing and sales. And for these types of housing, we've really noticed you need to shape a clear story, have renderings to really show people what these things are going to look like, because it's really a new housing type for people. And a lot of people just look at the square footage and they say, yeah, there's no way, no way I could live in that thing. So it's really important to have some good visuals when you're going into the marketing phase. Setting the pricing strategy, trying to figure out what you're going to charge for those houses. And then, just preparing the project for the market is something that we do a lot of. So it's this end-to-end approach. It really helps ensure that these well-planned projects, they're going to translate into successful developments. And we want that to be both financially successful, and we also just want it to be very livable for people. And we want people to care about their community and having them in their community. So that's all I have. I wanted to leave a lot of time for questions. I can roll back through slides if you have specific questions. So I really appreciate you guys all showing up, and I hope this gives you a better sense of what's possible in Oregon right now. And it's always changing because there's so much support for these laws. So just you have to just keep watching the news and seeing what's going on. Anyways, I have a QR code up there if you want to schedule a call just to talk about stuff. That's great. Or my phone number and my email is there too. So if we have any other questions, I'd love to answer some questions.
Yeah, I'll pop those up for you. So we have one here. Where do most of these projects get stuck?
They mostly get stuck in the very beginning of the project with the land itself. As I was saying, it's really hard to finance just raw dirt. So the first struggle is just having the money to be able to buy the land. It's great to own the land outright and not have a mortgage, or at least have a really large amount of equity in it, so that we can then borrow against the land for the horizontal and a lot of times for the construction loan. So that's it. And then also the land, as I was saying, these unforeseen things that come up. Maybe there's an existing house that you're demoing and it has asbestos in it, so it's much more expensive. Or the city requires, the engineering department requires something that you didn't hear about in the pre-app. You've turned in your plans, and they're requiring some infrastructure that you weren't thinking you had to do, which then just makes the perform and not work.
When do you or a landowner need to reach out to an attorney for assistance?
I think I try to avoid attorneys, but mostly just contracts. You can use your real estate agent, of course, for your sales, your purchases and your sales. But if you're bringing in partners, if the development is not going to just be you, and you're going to have investors involved, really good to have a lawyer look things over. We do that. We create our own. We can create the capital structure for projects. But ultimately, we always have a lawyer take a look at it.
We have a lot rolling in now. Does Hiatus only do development as a principal, or do you also do consulting?
We do consulting too. We're starting to actually consult on stuff all over the U.S. We've been doing some feasibilities on. We have a project in DeLand, Florida. There's one in Helper, Utah. We're starting to have people reach out and just go through that feasibility process, which is they already have the land, they like what we're doing, and so we'll take them through this process where basically we take a look at the land. We put our units on it. We'll then do a civil, the full feasibility. We'll have a civil engineer do some utility planning. Then we'll reach out to a horizontal contractor, get some big round numbers to know what the lots are going to cost to build. We have a pretty good idea of what our units cost to build. And then we do a financial pro forma. Oftentimes we'll do that pro forma on several different options on that same piece of land. So that at the end of feasibility, we can see if this project is gonna work or not. So yeah, we've been doing a lot of that.
So this is since this is a statewide class, we have some people in the Valley
Sure.
in attendance. Eugene planners claim to have a better middle housing code than the state. Is that true? And do different cities have their own codes versus the state code?
Yeah, I mean, I know Eugene's pretty well, but I know Bend's better. So I'll just speak to Bend as an example. So House Bill 2001 was passed, and then the city of Bend had a stakeholder group, which I got to be a part of. And that was just a stakeholder group of a bunch of us in town that to give advice on, how to adopt the law that they were now requiring of the city. And we went even further, right? So in Bend, we have micro apartment code. We have shared court. We have small unit lots you can do. This is all in 3.8 development alternatives. So a city can go even further than what the state is requiring. And so Eugene, I think, has done that as well. I don't remember the exact details of how much further they've gone or what the details are, but I think that they have.
What is an average charge for a feasibility study?
Well, it can be as much as just a couple grand if we're just looking at a small site and not doing a full feasibility. Some of like a larger development, we looked at an 80 unit. I think it was about 3 acres. And that's where we got actual bids from a civil engineer, got drawings done, got actual bids from a horizontal contractor. We did 3 different site maps. It had some really nuanced code to it we had to study. And that was around $30,000. So it just ranges. And that's what we do is we talk to people. We also don't want to do stuff that other people know how to do. A lot of the clients we have for these feasibility studies, a lot of them are architects, real estate agents, people that have developed other stuff but want to develop this. So they may have the skills to do some part of the feasibility that we don't. So we meet and we say like, hey, this is the gaps we think are there. This is what we think we should do so you can know if this is a good piece of land. And then we estimate how long we think that's going to take right out of scope. And then we just do an hourly thing based on what we've agreed to.
How is parking addressed in any of the new laws?
Well, parking in Bend, you don't have to include parking anymore. And that's been really an interesting thing for us.
At all?
Yeah, you don't have to include parking at all in your developments anymore. It's gone. Yeah. So for us, that's been interesting because depending on where the land is, as the central district in Bend gets built out and is much more walkable, the need for a car is less. But when we are building outside of what we think is walkable, we always try to have at least one space for our cottages.
Do you get much resistance to your projects from neighbors?
Yeah, definitely. I think the really funny thing about it is the resistance is really, really high in the beginning. In the 22 unit cottage development, someone said, how are you going to control, if you're going to allow one dog, you're going to have 22 dogs running around. And it was like, well, I don't know. It's a possibility that can happen. So there's like a fear of change that happens a lot with our stuff. But then I think once the units go in and people see them and see that they're a quality thing that's in the neighborhood, then that resistance is usually less. But some people just don't like this type of development, and that's okay. I mean, I understand that. And if you don't, we have a city process and a state process, and get involved. That's okay. That's how our system works. So
once you lock the land up, how long does it generally take to get through due diligence?
Well, it depends on your contract. We always hope to get like at least 60 days for us to be able to look into the property without with getting our refund on our escrow. So, or on what we've put down. So I'd always ask for 60 days. If some people will only do 45, if you really like the property and have the time to do what you think is going to be a proper due diligence in 45 days, then that's probably all right. But 60 days is good. That gives you time to, work with someone like us to do a site map and get some really good information that you're going to give to the city for the pre-app. The pre-apps are free in Bend. I'm not sure about other cities in Oregon, but that's just a good place to start. It's not always accurate when you get to the actual plans, but it definitely gives you a place to start to know what's going to be required.
Do you have any projects going anywhere along the coast, including Newport or Lincoln City?
No, not that I know of. I think we've had a couple of projects that almost went out in Newport, but nothing that's been built yet. But we can do projects all over Oregon.
Well, it looks like that's the end of our questions.
Okay.
Jesse, what an incredible presentation. We appreciate you so much.
Yeah, thanks. That was really fun.
Awesome. Well, hey guys, if you have any questions after this, please feel free to reach out to your sales rep for Western, and then we can get you connected with Jesse. I know Jesse put up his QR code up there, so please feel free to reach out. Sounds like he's always open to working with you guys and looking for opportunities for you.
Yeah, happy to talk to you about anything you want to talk about. I think it's always good to have discussions about this stuff. We really believe in this as a housing type too. So if you need our help, we can help in a way where we're a consultant for you. But I'm also happy just to answer questions and stuff.
Yeah. Well, and you guys have been a great partner for us, and so we know how well and how happy you make everybody that you get to work with. So I could not recommend you guys enough for these projects.
I appreciate that, Kyle. Thank you. You guys have been great too. I love your coffee.
That's always a highlight for sure.
All right.
All
Well,
right.
that's it. Thanks very much. And you guys have a good week.
Thank
You
you
too.
as well. Okay, y'all.